Echoes of war linger through the ages as the secrets of ancient fortification continue to shape how we defend ourselves today. This is your guide from Fieldcraft Chronicles, where we dig deep into the enduring strategies that have protected lives for centuries. Survival, honestly, is an architecture that never goes out of style. Its principles, tested by time, remain as vital as ever. Welcome back to Fieldcraft Chronicles, where the lessons of history become the tools of tomorrow. Today we're descending into the trenches of the Great War to uncover something extraordinary: the ancient defensive wisdom that soldiers rediscovered in the mud of Flanders and the Somme. These weren't just military tactics, they were survival principles forged in centuries past, resurrected by desperate men who found themselves living like medieval besiegers in a modern war. What they learned about defense in depth, terrain exploitation, and psychological resilience continues to echo through military doctrine and survival philosophy today. This is the story of how war strips away technology's veneer and reveals the unchanging truths of human defense. Defense in depth, the layered fortress of no man's land. When British soldiers first dug into Belgian soil in 1914, they were unconsciously recreating defensive systems as old as Babylon's walls. The Western Front became a vast, horizontal fortress stretching from the Channel to Switzerland, but its true genius lay in what you couldn't see from above. Walk through a typical trench system and you'd encounter 3 distinct defensive belts, each designed to bleed an attacker's momentum just as ancient citadels used outer walls, baileys, and keeps. The front-line trenches were deliberately expendable, lightly manned observation posts where sentries crouched in waterlogged dugouts, listening for the scrape of wire cutters or the thump of approaching boots. Behind them, support trenches housed reserve platoons in deeper excavations, some carved 15 feet into chalk or clay, reinforced with timber salvaged from shattered villages. These weren't mere holes in the ground. They were engineered survival chambers where men learned to read the earth itself for safety. The deepest positions, the reserve trenches, sat beyond artillery range where soldiers could sleep without the constant percussion of shells reshaping the landscape. Communication trenches zigzagged between these layers like the covered passages of crusader castles, preventing enfilade fire and creating a labyrinth that confused attackers even if they breached the first line. German engineers, drawing on their nation's castle-building heritage, excavated concrete bunkers 30 feet underground, modern dungeons with steel doors and ventilation shafts, where machine gun crews could survive bombardments that turned the surface into a moonscape. These men understood what ancient defenders knew: depth buys time, and time allows reinforcement, counterattack, and survival. Choke points and killing grounds, these were the keys to controlling the battlefield. The principle of area denial found its most brutal expression in the carefully orchestrated death zones that surrounded every trench system. Soldiers became students of terrain just as their ancestors had been, identifying every fold in the ground, every shell crater that could hide an advancing enemy. Barbed wire entanglements stretched in belts 30 yards deep, not placed randomly but funneled attackers toward pre-registered machine gun positions, artificial mountain passes where firepower replaced geography. British and German sappers studied their sectors with the same attention medieval castellans gave to approaches, noting where morning fog lingered longest, where drainage created firm footing, and where a slight rise provided defilade from enemy observation posts. Water obstacles multiplied the defensive advantage exponentially. The Isère River in Belgium became an intentional moat when Belgian forces opened sluice gates and flooded German advance routes, creating an impassable wetland that held the line for 4 years. Soldiers relearned the ancient truth that controlling water meant controlling movement, and they applied it ruthlessly. French positions, cleverly incorporated natural streambeds into their trench networks, actually using them as ready-made anti-tank ditches long before tanks even existed. When tanks finally appeared on the battlefield, defenders quickly developed what you might call the modern equivalent of castle portcullises, concealed strongpoints housing anti-tank rifles and field guns, all positioned at narrow crossing points, exactly where, medieval engineers would have placed arrow slits and murder holes. Earth itself became armour, as both sides exploited the terrain and delved underground, transforming the landscape into a complex battleground of trenches, dugouts, and tunnels. The soldiers of 1914 rediscovered what Bronze Age warriors knew. The earth itself is the ultimate protection. As artillery grew more devastating, men burrowed deeper, creating an underground civilization in the chalky soil beneath Picardy and Artois. German Stollen, British deep dugouts, and French abris became increasingly sophisticated, some featuring multiple rooms, electric lighting salvaged from destroyed towns, and ventilation systems that would have impressed Roman engineers. Walk into the preserved Vimy Ridge tunnels today, and you're entering spaces that echo the rock-cut tombs of Petra or the catacombs of Rome, human survival achieved through intimate knowledge of geology. Soldiers, learned to read soil almost like it was a language. Blue clay, for instance, meant waterlogging and, the ever-present threat of trench foot. Chalk signalled stable walls, perfect for those deep excavations. But sandy soil, that always demanded constant shoring with timber. This wasn't just some academic geology lesson. It was life-or-death fieldcraft, passed down through whispered conversations and, honestly, a lot of bitter experience. Engineers used mine warfare to extend the battlefield vertically, tunneling beneath enemy lines to plant massive explosive charges. It was siege mining, really, brought into the 20th century with industrial explosives. The blast at Messines Ridge in 1917, created by 19 underground mines, was actually heard in London and quite literally changed the topography. It proved that terrain advantage could be manufactured through applied geological knowledge. Men who survived these subterranean campaigns emerged with an almost spiritual respect for the protective qualities of Earth, a lesson that modern survivalists and preppers have had to relearn. The trenches taught us that survival principles transcend their era, because they're rooted in unchanging realities of terrain, human psychology, and, the mathematics of defense. Whether you're preparing a homestead, planning emergency shelters, or simply seeking to understand how resilient humans truly are, these lessons offer more than historical curiosity, they're actionable wisdom. If this deep dive into the fieldcraft of fortification resonated with you, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and, ring that notification bell. Share this with fellow history enthusiasts, preppers, and anyone who understands that the past isn't dead. It's the foundation we build our future upon. Until next time, stay curious, stay prepared, and remember that the best survival tool is knowledge tested by time.